He thought adopting a stray puppy was a simple act of kindness, but little did he know, this tiny, scruffy bundle would turn his entire world upside down in ways he never imagined. The streets were bustling with life, yet for one tiny soul, it was a daily battle for survival. On a crisp autumn morning, the protagonist, Ethan, a quiet young man with a penchant for solitude, was making his way home from work. Ethan lived alone in a small but cozy apartment, often finding solace in books and music, but his life lacked companionship. A chance encounter was about to change all of that. Walking through a narrow alleyway, Ethan heard a faint whimpering sound that stopped him in his tracks. Curious, he followed the sound to discover a shivering, muddy little puppy huddled against a trash can. The puppy's large brown eyes, filled with fear and desperation, locked onto Ethan's. The sight was heart-wrenching, its ribs were visible, and it looked like it hadn't eaten in days. Ethan hesitated. He had no experience with animals, let alone a stray. But something about the puppy's gaze stirred something deep within him, a mix of compassion and an inexplicable urge to help. With a deep breath, Ethan took off his scarf, gently wrapped the trembling puppy in it, and carried it home. At Ethan's apartment, the scene was a blend of awkwardness and determination. The puppy, though hesitant at first, slowly warmed up to the comfort of a warm blanket and a bowl of water. Ethan named him Max, a name that just felt right as the puppy wagged its tail weakly in response. The small apartment, which had always felt empty, now buzzed with a different energy. Max, despite his initial shyness, had a spirit that refused to be broken. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself adjusting his routine, learning how to bathe, feed, and care for his new companion. Max, in turn, began to show glimpses of his playful personality, bringing life and joy into Ethan's once quiet world. Little did Ethan know, this stray puppy was about to teach him lessons about love, resilience, and the unexpected ways life can change for the better. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Max developed a close bond. Ethan's once monotonous routine now revolved around the puppy. He spent hours walking through the park, playing fetch, and researching how to care for a stray dog. Max's playful antics filled Ethan's apartment with warmth and laughter, transforming it into a lively haven. However, as Max grew healthier and more active, Ethan noticed a peculiar behavior that puzzled him. Max would often sit by the apartment door, staring at it intently as if waiting for someone. Every time Ethan opened the door, Max would dart outside, sniffing the air frantically before looking around with a sense of urgency. At first, Ethan dismissed it as excitement for walks or curiosity about the outside world. But as the behavior persisted, Ethan began to wonder if there was something deeper behind it. One evening, during their usual walk, Max suddenly pulled hard on his leash, leading Ethan toward an unfamiliar part of town. It was an area Ethan rarely visited, quiet, with rows of abandoned buildings and overgrown lots. Max's tail wagged with determination as he sniffed the ground, dragging Ethan along. Ethan tried to redirect him, but Max was insistent, his eyes filled with a strange mix of excitement and desperation. As they turned a corner, Max stopped abruptly in front of an old, crumbling house. He barked loudly, his body trembling with anticipation. Ethan, feeling both curious and uneasy, approached the house cautiously. It appeared deserted, with broken windows and a faded for sale sign hanging loosely on the fence. Max refused to budge, barking and scratching at the front door as if trying to get inside. Ethan knelt beside Max, trying to calm him down. "What is it, buddy? Why are you so worked up?" he murmured, gently stroking Max's fur. But Max wouldn't be pacified. His frantic behavior only grew more intense, and Ethan couldn't ignore the sense that this place held some significance for the puppy. The next day, Ethan decided to investigate further. He asked around the neighborhood, hoping to find someone who knew about the old house or its history. An elderly woman at a nearby grocery store paused when Ethan mentioned the house. Her expression grew somber as she shared a story that sent chills down Ethan's spine. "That house belonged to a family who moved away a few months ago," she explained. "They had a dog that went missing just before they left. They searched everywhere, but never found him. Poor thing must have been left behind." Ethan's heart sank as he pieced the story together. Could Max be the dog that was abandoned by this family? It would explain his behavior, his relentless urge to return to the house, his anxious waiting by the door. Ethan felt a mix of emotions: anger at the family who had left Max behind, sadness for the puppy's heartbreak, and determination to give Max the love and stability he deserved. But as Ethan began to uncover more about Max's past, he realized the journey wasn't over. Max's longing for his old family wasn't something that could be resolved overnight. Despite Ethan's efforts to provide a loving home, Max's heart seemed divided. Ethan wondered if he could ever truly fill the void left by the family who had abandoned him. The rising tension tested Ethan's resolve. He grappled with questions he didn't have answers to. Should he take Max back to the house to see if it would bring closure? Would Max ever stop yearning for the past? And most importantly, could Ethan prove to Max that he was his new family now? Ethan knew one thing for certain: he wasn't going to give up on Max. He decided to face these challenges head-on, no matter how difficult they might be. What he didn't know was that Max's journey to healing would lead to an unexpected turn, one that would change both their lives forever. Ethan couldn't ignore Max's persistent behavior anymore. Every walk seemed to draw them back to that old, abandoned house. Each time Max reached the crumbling steps, his wagging tail would falter, and his barks would carry an edge of desperation. Ethan realized that he couldn't keep pretending Max's past didn't matter. Determined to help his loyal companion, Ethan decided to revisit the house one last time, hoping it might bring clarity or closure. One rainy afternoon, with clouds looming dark above, Ethan put on his coat, leashed Max, and set off toward the house. Max seemed to sense something different about this trip. His steps were more purposeful, his ears perked with alertness. By the time they reached the familiar corner, Max was tugging so hard on the leash that Ethan almost let go. When they arrived, Max darted straight to the door, scratching at it with a mix of excitement and frustration. Ethan took a deep breath and knocked, even though the house looked as deserted as ever. His knock echoed eerily, but to his surprise, the door creaked open slightly, as if it had been left ajar. Max wasted no time and slipped inside, his small frame vanishing into the shadows of the empty house. "Max, wait," Ethan called, following close behind. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and decay. The once vibrant home was now a shell of its former self, with faded wallpaper peeling from the walls and dust coating every surface. Ethan's flashlight beam revealed little more than broken furniture and scattered debris. But Max moved with a sense of purpose, sniffing the floor and wagging his tail as if he were on the brink of discovery. Suddenly, Max let out a loud, heart-wrenching bark that echoed through the house. Ethan hurried toward him, his heart racing. Max had stopped in a small room at the back of the house, where a tattered blanket lay crumpled on the floor. Max pawed at the blanket, whining softly, before curling up on it as if it were the most familiar thing in the world. Ethan crouched beside him, his flashlight revealing a faint, weathered name embroidered on the corner. "Buddy." Ethan's throat tightened. This was it. This was the proof he needed. Max wasn't just any stray. He was Buddy, the dog who had been left behind by the family who once called this house home. Ethan felt a mix of sorrow and anger. How could anyone abandon such a loyal and loving companion? But the moment wasn't over yet. As Ethan comforted Max, a sudden sound broke the stillness, a car pulling up outside. Startled, Ethan peered through the window and saw a small old sedan parking in front of the house. A man and a teenage girl stepped out, their hesitant movements suggesting they weren't sure they belonged there. Max's ears perked up, and his tail began to wag furiously. He bolted toward the door, barking with an excitement Ethan hadn't seen before. The man and girl froze as the door swung open, and Max leaped toward them, his barks turning to joyful yelps. The girl knelt down, tears streaming down her face as she wrapped her arms around Max. "Buddy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Is it really you?" The man's expression softened as he joined the embrace. "I can't believe this," he murmured. After all this time, Ethan watched from a distance, his emotions swirling. It was a bittersweet moment. Max, Buddy, had found his old family, the people he had been waiting for all along. But what did this mean for him? Had he just facilitated Max's return to a life that no longer had room for him? The girl, still holding Max, looked up at Ethan with gratitude. "Thank you for taking care of him," she said. "We thought we'd lost him forever. We never wanted to leave him behind, but we didn't have a choice when we moved so suddenly." Ethan nodded, struggling to find the right words. "He's been waiting for you," he finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I have to ask, what happens now?" The man exchanged a glance with the girl, then looked at Ethan. "Let's talk," he said. "Buddy deserves the best, and it seems like you've given him that." In that moment, Ethan realized the climax wasn't just about Max finding his old family. It was about deciding what the future would hold for all of them. And that decision, he knew, was just the beginning of another chapter in their intertwined lives. The air felt heavy with anticipation as Ethan, Max, now confirmed as Buddy, and the reunited family gathered inside the old house. The rain outside tapped gently against the broken windows, its rhythmic sound filling the silence. Max's tail wagged uncontrollably, his excitement palpable as he moved between Ethan and the teenage girl, as if torn between two worlds. The man, who introduced himself as Richard, began explaining. "This house used to be ours," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We lived here until 5 years ago when I lost my job. Things spiraled, and we had to move quickly to stay with my brother in another city. We thought we'd have time to come back for Buddy, but life got in the way." The teenage girl, Lily, wiped tears from her face. "We searched for him when we came back to visit months later, but he was gone. I never forgave myself for not making sure he was with us that day." Ethan listened quietly, his heart torn. On one hand, he could see the genuine regret in their eyes. On the other, he couldn't shake the bond he had formed with Max during the months they'd been together. Max had become his companion, his confidant, his family. Max nuzzled Lily's hand, letting out a small whimper that made Ethan's chest tighten. It was clear the dog remembered his old family. But it was also clear that he had grown to love Ethan just as deeply. The dual loyalty in Max's eyes was a reflection of Ethan's own conflicted feelings. "Buddy's been through a lot," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence. "When I found him, he was thin, scared, and alone. I don't know what he went through after you left, but I do know he's resilient. He's one of the kindest, most loyal souls I've ever met." Richard nodded, his expression somber. "We owe him so much. He didn't deserve what happened to him. And we owe you too for taking care of him when we couldn't." The conversation shifted to logistics. Richard explained that their lives were more stable now. He had a steady job, and they lived in a pet-friendly home with a large backyard, perfect for a dog like Max. Ethan listened, his mind racing. He wanted what was best for Max, but the thought of letting him go felt unbearable. Lily's voice broke through Ethan's thoughts. "I think Buddy has 2 families now," she said softly. "He loves us, but he loves you too. Maybe there's a way we can share him." The idea caught Ethan off guard. Sharing a dog? It seemed unconventional, but then again, nothing about this situation was typical. Richard added, "We're not far from here, just a couple of towns over. If you're open to it, we'd love to stay in touch and work something out." Ethan looked at Max, who was sitting contentedly between him and Lily, his tail thumping against the floor. The idea of losing Max completely was too much to bear, but the thought of denying him a chance to reconnect with his old family felt equally wrong. "I'd be open to that," Ethan said cautiously, "but only if it's what's best for Mac." The group spent the next hour discussing how it might work. Ethan would keep Max for now, but they agreed to regular visits with Richard and Lily. If Max showed signs of wanting to spend more time with them, Ethan promised to make adjustments. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it felt fair. As the conversation wound down, Richard offered a handshake. "Thank you for everything you've done," he said earnestly. "You didn't just save Buddy, you gave him a new life." Lily knelt down to hug Max one last time before they left. "We'll see you soon, Buddy," she whispered, her tears soaking into his fur. Max licked her face, his way of reassuring her that this wasn't goodbye. After they left, the house felt quieter, but Ethan didn't feel alone. Max curled up at his feet, letting out a contented sigh. Ethan scratched behind his ears, his mind replaying the events of the day. The falling action wasn't about choosing one family over another. It was about finding a way to honor Max's past while embracing his present. Ethan knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for Max's sake, it was worth it. In that moment, Ethan realized something profound. Love, whether from a person or a pet, isn't about possession. It's about doing what's right for the one you care about, even if it means sharing that love with others. Just when Ethan thought the arrangement with Max's old family had settled into a peaceful routine, a call from Richard brought everything crashing down. It was late in the evening, and Ethan had just finished dinner. Max lay curled at his feet, his warm presence a constant comfort. Ethan answered the phone with a sense of unease. Richard's voice was strained, urgent. "We need to talk," Richard said. "Lily hasn't stopped crying since our last visit with Buddy. She feels like we abandoned him all over again, and it's breaking her. She wants him back. Permanently." Ethan's stomach tightened. The arrangement had been working fine, or so he thought. Max had visited Richard and Lily twice since their initial reunion, and while he enjoyed the visits, he always came home to Ethan, tail wagging, full of joy. Now, it seemed, the fragile balance they had struck was falling apart. "I don't understand," Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Max, our buddy, has a home here. He's happy. I thought we agreed this was best for him." Richard sighed heavily on the other end. "It's not that simple. Lily's been through a lot, and losing Buddy again feels like losing a piece of her childhood. She's convinced he belongs with us. And to be honest, I don't know how to argue with her." Ethan hung up the phone, his mind racing. He looked down at Max, who gazed back with trusting eyes, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. For months, Max had been his anchor, pulling him out of loneliness and teaching him what unconditional love felt like. The thought of losing him now felt unbearable. The next few days were tense. Ethan avoided Richard's calls, unsure of what to say. But then, one afternoon, Richard showed up unannounced at Ethan's door, Lily standing beside him. She held a leash in her hand, her expression a mixture of hope and determination. "We just want to talk," Richard said quickly, sensing Ethan's resistance. "Please." Ethan reluctantly invited them in. Max greeted them warmly, his tail wagging as he nuzzled Lily's hand. The sight tugged at Ethan's heartstrings. It was clear Max loved her too. But was love enough to erase the months of care and connection Ethan had built with him? Lily wasted no time. "Buddy is our dog," she said, her voice trembling. "We lost him once, and I can't lose him again. He belongs with us, with his real family." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I understand how you feel, but Max Buddy has a life here now. I've been taking care of him, loving him, and he's happy. I don't think uprooting him again is what's best for him." "But he remembers us," Lily insisted. "You saw how he reacted when we met. He still loves us. And he loves me too." Ethan shot back, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "This isn't about who he loves more. It's about what's best for him. Have you considered how confusing this must be for him?" The conversation grew heated, emotions spilling over on both sides. Lily's tears returned, and Richard struggled to mediate. Max, sensing the tension, let out a soft whine and nudged Ethan's hand, as if pleading for peace. Finally, Richard spoke up. "Ethan, we're not trying to take him away from you out of spite. We miss him. And we want to make things right." Ethan felt the weight of their words, but he also knew his own feelings couldn't be ignored. Max wasn't just a dog to him, he was family. And family wasn't something you gave up lightly. "I need time to think," Ethan said finally, his voice heavy. "This isn't a decision I can make on the spot." Richard and Lily reluctantly agreed, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. As the door closed behind them, Max pressed his head against Ethan's leg, offering silent comfort. Ethan knelt down and hugged him tightly, his mind swirling with doubt and fear. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Questions plagued him. Was he being selfish by holding on to Max? Or was he protecting him from more upheaval? And what about Lily? Was her pain greater than his own? The resurgence of conflict forced Ethan to confront the complexities of love, loss, and what it truly meant to do the right thing. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but one thing was clear: Max's happiness had to come first, no matter how much it hurt. Ethan spent the following days grappling with his decision. His house, usually filled with the comforting presence of Max, now felt heavy with uncertainty. Every time Max looked at him with those trusting eyes or wagged his tail in excitement, Ethan felt his heart ache. He knew that no matter what choice he made, someone would end up hurt. Finally, Ethan decided he needed a fresh perspective. He reached out to a local veterinarian, Dr. Carly, who also specialized in animal behavior. He explained the situation in detail, hoping she could offer guidance. Dr. Carly listened intently and then said, "The best decision is the one that prioritizes Max's well-being. Dogs thrive on stability, love, and a sense of belonging. While Max may have a history with his old family, he's clearly formed a strong bond with you. The key is to find a balance that doesn't jeopardize his happiness." This advice gave Ethan some clarity. He realized that the answer wasn't about choosing one family over the other. It was about creating a solution that would make Max feel safe and loved without more disruption to his life. But how could he make this work? Ethan decided to invite Richard and Lily over again. This time, he had a plan. When they arrived, he sat them down in the living room, Max resting comfortably by his side. "I've been thinking a lot about this," Ethan began. "And I believe there's a way we can all be part of Max's life without making him feel torn between us." Richard and Lily exchanged curious glances. "What do you mean?" Richard asked. "I'm proposing a shared arrangement," Ethan explained. "Max stays here with me, where he's already settled and happy. But I want you to be part of his life, too. You can visit him regularly, take him on outings, and be involved in his care. That way, Max gets the love of both families without the stress of being uprooted." Lily's eyes widened, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. "You'd really do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You'd let us see him whenever we want?" Ethan nodded. "Max is a special dog, and he's brought so much joy to all of us. I think he deserves all the love we can give him. This way, he won't have to choose, and neither will we." Richard leaned back in his chair, processing the idea. "It's unconventional," he admitted, "but it makes sense. We've been so focused on what we lost that we didn't think about what Max needs. If you're willing to share him, we're willing to try." Lily knelt down and stroked Max's fur, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means everything to me." The new arrangement began the following weekend. Richard and Lily arrived with a bag of toys and treats, and they took Max on a trip to the park. Ethan watched from his porch as they drove off, his heart heavy but hopeful. When Max returned later that day, he was tired but visibly happy, tail wagging as he trotted up to Ethan. Over time, the arrangement flourished. Richard and Lily became frequent visitors, and Ethan found himself appreciating their company. They shared stories, laughed over Max's antics, and even celebrated his birthday together. Max, oblivious to the complicated dynamics around him, thrived under the combined love and attention. The experience taught everyone involved valuable lessons about love and sacrifice. Ethan realized that true love often meant letting go of fear and embracing compromise. Richard and Lily learned to appreciate what they had in the present rather than dwelling on the past. And Max, the heart of it all, reminded them that unconditional love could heal even the deepest wounds. Months later, as the three of them sat together watching Max chase butterflies in the yard, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. This wasn't the life he had envisioned when he first found Max, but it was better in so many ways. They had turned a moment of conflict into an opportunity for growth, and Max had become the glue that held them together. In the end, Max didn't just find a home, he created a family. And for Ethan, Richard, and Lily, that was the greatest miracle of all. As the sun set on another perfect day, Ethan leaned back on his porch, watching Max play in the yard. The once abandoned puppy had become the center of a story that changed all their lives, a tale of love, forgiveness, and the beauty of second chances. In that moment, Ethan reflected on how far they had all come. When Ethan first found Max, he could never have imagined how the little dog would weave together two worlds. What began as an act of kindness, offering shelter to a stray, unfolded into a journey of heartache, tough decisions, and ultimately healing. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a catalyst for change, reminding everyone involved of the importance of selflessness and collaboration. Richard and Lily were no longer strangers or adversaries. They were part of the family. Visits became frequent and joyful, filled with laughter as Max showcased his endless energy and goofy antics. Ethan, who once felt nervous about opening his home to others, now found himself sharing meals and stories with people he had grown to deeply respect. Over time, their unusual arrangement proved to be more than just functional. It was transformative. Richard and Lily stopped viewing Max as something they had lost and started celebrating the new memories they were creating. Ethan, on the other hand, found his life enriched in ways he hadn't anticipated. Through Max, he had built connections that extended beyond the little dog's wagging tail. One particularly memorable day, the three of them threw a Max appreciation party in the backyard. They invited neighbors and friends, who marveled at the unusual but heartwarming dynamic. Max, wearing a tiny party hat, became the star of the evening, soaking in the affection of everyone around him. Ethan smiled as he realized how this once lonely pup had brought so many people together. Through it all, Max remained blissfully unaware of the complex emotions that had surrounded him. For him, life was simple: a ball to chase, a warm lap to curl up on, and an abundance of love from everyone he met. And perhaps that simplicity was the lesson they all needed. Love didn't have to be complicated. It just needed to be shared. As Ethan watched Max settle down for the night, his heart swelled with gratitude. What started as a small gesture, a decision to rescue a stray dog, had blossomed into something far greater. Max hadn't just found a home, he had created a family. And for Ethan, Richard, and Lily, their lives were forever changed because of one little dog's boundless capacity for love. Stories like Max's remind us that even the smallest act of kindness can have a ripple effect. If you've ever thought about adopting a pet, don't hesitate. Your decision could change not just their life, but yours as well. If Max's journey moved you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more heartwarming tales. And remember, every pet deserves a chance to find their forever family. Watch our next story to see how another incredible animal brought light into someone's life.